Hello, everyone. I am Mistress Danielle Blunt. I am a dominatrix with over 15 years experience in both lifestyle and professional domination and content creation. And I have really been enjoying having these conversations with other sex workers and people in the kink community. And I am thrilled to be here today with Valentina Fox. I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Valentina Fox. I'm a clip producer, dominatrix, primarily online femdom content creator. Um, and I love to focus on addiction, gooning, mesmerize, all those categories that are especially big right now. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I've been a big
Amazing.
fan of yours, like, since I started.
Oh gosh. Amazing. I I have you mentioned gooning, and it is one of my questions I have to ask for you. So maybe I'll just start right there. I am so curious. I tweeted about this a couple of months ago, but I feel like up until a few years ago, I had never heard the term gooning, and I've been working for a while in various forms, and it feels like a really new word in community. And I love the word. It's a sexy word. It's a sexy thing. I actually looked up the definition because I really wanted to chat with you about gooning, which is defined as a form of masturbation that involves edging, maintaining sexual arousal without reaching orgasm for a long period of time, resulting in a hypnotic trance-like state. And I'm so curious as to like the evolution of femdom language. And I have some thoughts around if gooning came into like the femdom lexicon because of content moderation from payment processors where you're like not allowed to talk about hypnosis or like anything of that type of mind control. And I'm so curious if like when you started working, were you seeing that word as well? Or have you noticed any changes on that and how you play with gooning in some of your content?
I actually the first Gooning clip that I made, I think, was in 2019. And that one was a request. That one was it was a sub that I was playing with all the time, and we were doing Gooning sessions, but I hadn't really heard that term very much then, and like I understood it, but yeah, I had never had someone like request a video with that. I didn't really see clips with that word in there. Um, but I made that was, yeah, my first Gooning clip in like the fall of 2019, and I remember immediately that was like my best selling clip at the time, and immediately like blew all my other clips out of the water. I think it came kind of naturally with my brand because I was always really big on denial, and like with Skype sessions, them paying for like a 10-minute Skype session and then thinking that at the end of 10 minutes they're going to get to come. And I love to say no at the end or be like, no, I'd actually rather you keep going. I'd rather you leave with blue balls. And at first I feel like, especially when I was a baby dom, sometimes I would like question myself on that. I'm like, just that, like what they want, especially when you're like newer and like less confident, um felt like maybe that was the right way to go. But I just feel like I built like such a strong relationship with my fans through denial and through like continuing the edging session after our session or after their clip binge, like encouraging them to extend it. I feel like I didn't fully understand gooning though until like a year later, and realized like it's basically just like extreme edging, like you were saying in the definition. I don't think I've ever actually heard the like actual definition of it, but that's exactly what I have like like what I
I've
say.
never looked it up before
Yeah.
either.
Like I just feel like
Yeah.
it's
I
edging.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, intense edging, I feel like, is definitely part of it. And I feel like you're talking about something that I find really interesting of like how DOMs kind of like find their niche
Mhm.
and like through like playing with different subs. And you were talking about how like you had this desire to have your subs like denied and denied and denied and like this perpetual state of like erotic denial. But you're like, oh, like as a professional
Mhm.
and like navigating the role of like both customer service and your own dominance is something that I find really interesting and love to hear people talk about because I do feel like, right, it is a service when people are interacting with a pro dom, it can be, but also for those of us who are actually dominant, it's like this delicate balance of being able to exert and play with our own dominance. And I know for myself, it definitely like it took me some like trial and error to find out like what my dominant persona feels like, where it feels like I am like acting in an authentic way that feels aligned with like how I act, how I like move generally through the world, although like maybe like a refined package of it. And I'm curious like what that was like for you as like a baby dom when you're making this content and like figuring out what works for you and what works for your clients as well while still being able to um do what interests you and like what makes you feel dominant.
Yeah, I think like you said, it definitely happens over time and like as you're finding your voice. I remember like, and even now when I look back at like my first clips, I kind of cringe, like just like the way I was talking, like just it doesn't feel like as authentically me. I feel like now I'm not really changing my voice much or trying really hard to be anything like definitely my real personality comes out a lot more. And I am like a very like playful person in person and like I love to just like tease people and like even like just friends. So bringing that more into my femdom style instead of trying to be just like brat, I think was what I was originally like going for, like bratty dom, like textbook bratty dom. And I guess sometimes that is like my style can be a little bit bratty, but it is definitely a lot more like sensual, hypnotic. And I love to talk. I love to get to know people. So that definitely comes out a lot in my clips and in my Skype type of sessions. Like I love to ask a lot of questions and like I definitely it is interesting. Just like the more you do this, the less it feels like you're playing a role and the more it just feels like an extension of yourself.
Yeah, it's I was doing a mentoring session with someone who was newer to dominating and I was talking a lot about that of like how I feel like so many of us when we first like enter the scene we're like I am playing like this specific archetype of the dom, like I am playing the brat. For me, like I'm playing like the old guard like classic leather dom who like is really invested in like high protocol training, and I think it takes a while to like actually like step into your own dominance of like, oh no, like these are the things that I actually like. This is what I like from like the archetype that I kind of like stepped into femdom doing. And like this is what I'll take, this is what I'll leave behind. Like fuck that, that's totally uninteresting to me. And like I want to try like all these other things. And I think it can be really fun when you like really start to step into that because I feel like for me that's where I find my power, like not when I'm performing a role, but when I'm able to really engage with subs. And I feel very similar to you. And I love asking submissives questions. I call it like data collection. My background's also in public health. Like I am a scientist and a researcher, and I take the same approach to my style of domination, where I'm like, great, like you're spoon feeding me information. And I feel like people who really like to play with a more like hypnotic, heavy psychological play often have like a similar approach of like, great, you're just giving me data, like each vulnerability that you offer to me, like on a silver platter, I will use to like bring you further into my web. And I think it's so fun to be able to find that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely the data collection part.
Well, I'm curious, how did you first find your way into femdom and content creation?
I feel like I had a little bit different of an introduction to it. So I actually worked as a makeup artist in New York for a long time before I was involved in the sex work community. Or I guess I got involved honestly in the sex work community very young when I was like 18 or 19 as a makeup artist. And I was doing makeup for a company who does like background services for escorts mostly. They do like background checks and then they also do brand building. So they would put together photo shoots. I met a lot of mostly escorts, but a few pro doms. Like I met Ada Vaughn through them, and a few other New York doms. And I don't know. I was at the time I moved to New York when I was 18, and I kind of tried to like dip my toe into sugaring just because I was getting a lot of attention from like older men and stuff when I was going out. And I feel like I've just always known, I have a blog post about it on my website, but my parents are both definitely female supremacists. And I was raised in a house where my mom was the boss, and my dad would always say things like, men are stupid, men are very easily succumb to beautiful women. Like, I just kind of grew up with that mindset. So when I moved to New York and was getting all this attention from like older wealthy men, I was like, I know I can do something with this. How can I like monetize this? Um, Sugaring was definitely not for me. It felt even more like playing pretend and like having to, I feel like just shut my mouth a lot when I disagreed with someone, if like, because they hold all the power in that dynamic, and that really didn't sit well with me. And then I started working with this company. I worked for them for a few years, and then I started doing makeup for a few other of those doms, like privately and whenever they needed something, and meeting more and more doms through that. I went to a few dungeons and did makeup on like sissification clients in the dungeon, that I was just the makeup artist, but like was a part of a session. So I was getting like more and more involved in it without being in it yet. And then I found the femdom community. I think I first found it in like 2016, and I was just like, wow, like, and that was back when it was like hashtag pay pig, like hashtag fuck you pay me, like a lot more, you know. um I
Yeah.
I felt,
Findom 101.
yeah, like a lot like simpler findom then. And I was just kind of like amazed. I was like, wow, like this is crazy. Like this whole community of women is like bullying men for money, and they're making a lot of like really good money. And I remember I showed this to a guy friend of mine who, he was like more of like my first sub, like before I realized it. Like he was always like the friend zoned, like bringing me out on dates, me telling him about my dates, and like he was, in love with me, and I was just like, you're just here to do things.
Having fun.
um so I told him about it. He was like, yeah, I think you would be good at that, whatever. Didn't really have that much of a reaction. And then about a year later, we hadn't talked very much. He started messaging me, asking if he could buy videos of me laughing at him, started to call me goddess when he was drinking, just like more and more. It slowly evolved into playing more and more. And I didn't really know like what his fetishes were, or like obviously he liked to be laughed at. Then he asked me to dress him up one day, like in panties and a bra, and it just became more and more. He was really into sissification, obviously, and it just became more and more play like that. And we played for 4 or 5 months, and he was like, I want to show you something. He showed me his Twitter. He had like 10,000 followers as a sub, and he was like a pro sub, like a filming sub. Yeah, and it all happened because of the conversation we had a year before, where I showed him the community, and he acted like it was like nothing special. He was just like, oh, cool. Like but it lit such a spark in him. And then, and then it came back to me, like, because we started playing for 5 or 6 months. I really liked it. He was like, I think you should have more subs. I think you should get on Twitter. To be honest, a lot of my hesitation was just going fully face out and just like putting myself fully out there. I think that's one of the biggest like obstacles for like face out sex workers, is that decision of like to go all in. Yeah, and then I did that in the beginning of 2019, and yeah, I feel like being in New York, I think definitely helped, starting, because I got to meet up with subs like a few months in, and like actually have some like play sessions. Um, but yeah, it kind of happened like through my introduction to pro doms as a makeup artist, and then also through my personal life, and like one of my closest guy friends being a sissy, my first sissy sub.
I know, like that's amazing. I mean, it sounds like they just like you're like a magnet and they
Yeah.
they find you. I feel like I was reading some of your website too, and I love reading like both like sex worker root stories and kink root stories. And I feel like I have a very similar background where I was like doing all of these things with men that I didn't have language for. And I was like, well, like I'm actually not interested. I'm not dating in like a traditional way. I'm totally like uninterested in it. I really like using men. I like telling other men about those experiences. I like differentiating like between who gets what and like making sure that, that like hierarchy is like very much known. And like it was always denial for me was always what I was really interested in. And I my earlier like doming experiences or what I would now like call doming were convincing people who had girlfriends to cheat on their girlfriend and getting them like right to the point that they were about to cheat. And I'm like, no, we couldn't possibly. That would be so wrong. And like leaving them with blue balls and like leaving and like going home and masturbating. And I was like, how do you Google that? Like it took me, my friend actually saw it in they were taking a class on human sexuality. And the place that I trained at went and gave a lecture there. And he's like, hey, like, the people you sleep with talk, and it would be like remiss of me not to tell you about this like BDSM training chateau where like I think you need to go and train. And I was like, okay, thanks.
Crazy.
um but I had no language for it. I like really because it wasn't the like, and I think that's why I'm so interested in psychological play. It was never like the whips and chains or bondage or like any search term that I would find. It would be like, oh, like this specific dynamic where like the woman is using him for her pleasure is what I want. And like I didn't know how to search for
Yeah.
that because it's not performance that I'm interested in.
And then you like find the names for stuff, or you, and it's just like your
Yeah,
whole, wow, like this is what I like. Like,
exactly. I think that's why I was so excited by Gooning. I'm like, oh my God, a word for the thing. It's amazing.
exactly.
I still really think it's because of payment processors though, because right, because we can't say hypnosis on so many different platforms. And like on one platform, my name, Mistress Blunt, is censored to Mistress Smoke, which is just like ridiculous. Like Blunt has so many different meanings. And I'm like, what can we say and what can't we say? And then I feel like it changes the porn that we're making and it
Yeah.
creates like whole new niches of porn because we're adapting to the content moderation strategies. And I think it's so interesting like watching that take place.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Because I, for a while, like I would tag most of my videos as mindfuck and mesmerize. But some of those like didn't feel like, because they were gooning clips, but it didn't feel like I consider mesmerize like the more like almost like hypnosis, you know, like with a lots of like meditative kind of,
Spirals in the
yeah,
background.
needs like, and then mindfuck I guess is more the like, you know, just mindfuck, like speaking, confusing them, getting them horny, denied, confused, all the things. But yeah, gooning and edging didn't really feel right either, because I feel like edging just didn't last as long. It doesn't last as long, you know, like people won't like we said, gooning is like an intense version of it. So it would be like, no, like I want you to do this for like 6 hours tonight. Like I want you to be like in your closet all night long, like this.
Yeah, it's like really making sure they enter that altered state,
Yeah, the
which
hypnosis.
right, it's just like an intense form of meditation.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think of it as. Yeah, and I used to tag some of my clips meditative domination. I love that gooning is like an actual like keyword now and like an actual category now. And I actually saw that Clips for Sale just put up that that was like their hottest new category of the year was gooning.
So interesting. I really like am fascinated by like seeing new words come up. I guess that's what you get for being in the community for so long is you get to see like
Yeah,
new styles, like newer doms doing new things, and like how
Like,
sexuality is in response to these online platforms, and it just shifts
yeah,
all the
and
time.
because I remember relapse fantasy was allowed when I was first making clips, and that was also a big category. And now like relapse is not allowed anymore. I would love for them to add porn addiction as a category, but I don't know if that will happen or not.
I'm curious about that too, because I've seen some of your 12-step porn addiction clips, and well, I'm very interested in it because I love taboo psychological play. And also, is that allowed on clip sites with addiction? I'm so curious.
Yeah, it has been. It's just not, like I said, it's not like a real category. Like I tag those things because love addiction is a category, but I like that's different.
Oh.
Sometimes I tag it in there and like clips for sale, but yeah, like usually tagged under gooning or mindfuck because but yeah, I was a little bit, I am really happy with how it went over because I was a little bit, because I do think of it as like kind of taboo because I did follow like the exact 12-step program. Like in a bunch of my clips, I'm actually reading from the 12-step book.
So hot.
Just like changing words, like stepping out alcoholism.
I
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're also like, okay, so this is also what I was interested in chatting with you about is that like I'm not a medical professional. I have a background in psychology, but I'm not a psychologist. I don't know about you, but I like to say that before I talk about like anything related to mental health. And in the mental health community, whether porn addiction or not is a thing is like very disputed amongst mental health professionals. And the American Psychological Association actually doesn't recognize porn addiction
Yeah.
as a thing, and it's usually about like your relationship, your like social, psychological, cultural, religious upbringing that play a role in your relationship to porn that makes it feel unhealthy, but it's not categorized in the same addictions. And this is something I think about and talk about a lot in general. And I'm curious, both in your relationship to like the fantasy created in your clips and like your own personal thoughts around porn addiction.
Yeah, I actually read an article talking about porn addiction yesterday and exactly what you were saying. It was just like by a psychologist talking about how it's not like a recognized addiction and how it triggers different points of your brain than like real addictions trigger. Like it hits like the opposite side of your brain. And it was talking specifically about what you said about how it's more related to like how much shame was put around porn and sexuality and like for like religious trauma. Like they were saying it's not about like how often you're jerking off or how much you're jerking off that carries how badly people, how deep people think they are or how bad their addiction is. It's more about how they were raised and what, especially if they have like a religious background and they have a lot of shame around it, that makes it even more addictive. Like the shame, I talk about that in my clips a lot
Yeah.
too, how much shame is a part of it and I how isolating the shame part can be. And yeah, like I don't know. I really, because I've definitely seen like porn ruin people's lives, and I've definitely seen people like really abuse it and spiral out of control. But it definitely is like different than, like a drug or alcohol where you're not going to have like withdrawal symptoms or like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's tricky
It's
because it's
different than a chemical addiction. It's different than something you need to like slowly wean
yeah.
yourself off of or you might die. I definitely think. And I think there's something like again, like not a mental health professional, but have done a lot of reading about the like I guess like the conflict between mental health professionals, some of who think that it is an addiction and some that don't. And from my understanding, my personal belief is that there's so much there that is like interpersonal and related to like stigma and shame and like the desire for closeness and like I feel like love porn and sex addiction kind of get wrapped up in what is like really codependency.
Yeah.
Is my like is how I understand it. And those things are all very real, like very, very real and like very potent. And like you're talking about, the more shame that there is, or the more like isolated that you are, or the more like the more codependent that you are, like these things can really manifest in ways that like really fuck up your life. So it's not to say that that's not, that it doesn't have like it can't have a very intense impact.
That's what the article I was reading was saying, that it's not necessarily a diagnosis, it's more of a symptom of underlying problems.
Yeah.
And that a lot of people, especially men, aren't able to recognize the emotions that they're actually feeling. So like feeling shame or feeling anger for where they're at in life, or just frustration and then in a relationship that they're in, or not feeling heard, and then going to porn kind of to release that. But obviously that doesn't go anywhere if they're just dealing with it that way. So it just like gets worse and worse and worse, and that they're not really aware of like the underlying emotion. I thought anger was an interesting one that was like in that article specifically, because I have a few clips specifically focused on like hate stroking, which is like basically like mocking it, like porn addiction, like really intensely, and being like, like, you say that you hate me, you say that you hate women like me, like women like me are ruining society, and I don't deserve to get everything handed to me on a silver platter, and I don't deserve all this just for being hot, but here you are jerking to it, like angry, hating it, but you're still here, you're still buying my clips, you're still paying, and you blame me, but this is all you, like and I think that like those people especially, obviously that's like anger, like they're like frustrated with their life and their relationship,
Totally.
like the privilege that they see from like women profiting off of it.
Yeah, well, it's like I feel like so much of BDSM is also the like very real eroticization of something that feels too difficult to process. So like it this is like for me and myself and like my experience working with people, right, like shame is such a huge motivator, and anger and confusion, and like where your desires run into conflict with your upbringing and like your culture, or like what society says that you should want and shouldn't want. I feel like really hits that. I think it's interesting what you were saying about um people kind of like using porn to self-regulate when they're unable to articulate their emotions. And there's this, I feel like I talk about this in every interview that I do when I'm talking to doms, but there's this term called typical male alexithymia, which actually is a diagnosis. And alexithymia is the inability to name your feelings or know what they are. So it can create this like really confusing experience, an overwhelming experience when you are unable to. And because of how men are socialized in our society, it has become so ingrained in socialization that there's actually a diagnostic term called traditional male alexithymia to talk about this, the experience of men not being able to name their emotions. And of course, not all men have that, but it is significant enough that there is like it is talked about in psychological fields.
That's so funny that you bring that up. I was talking about that with my friend yesterday, just how interesting how many like grown men that I've talked to that are like, oh yeah, I don't know the last time I've cried. Like, oh yeah, this really bad thing happened, this really bad thing happened, but I just didn't like, I don't know, I didn't like cry, or I wasn't upset. I just kind of like moved on. And then they have all of these like, a porn addiction, or like other like underlying, like other manifestations of that underlying issue. And then yeah, but they just not aren't able to pinpoint it. That's what the article was kind of finished with, was saying that like porn addiction can't be treated the same way that other addictions can be treated. Like normal treatment methods are ineffective, and actually the most effective method is having them be able to pinpoint their emotions and where they feel them in their body and what they actually are, rather than like just jerking off about
It's so
it.
interesting. Yeah, I feel like jerking off about it is just one thing that you can do. I actually have on my contact form, one of the questions I ask is when was the last time you cried? And I always get the most interesting responses. And I actually have a lot of queer clients who see me, a lot of people who aren't cis men. Um, and I haven't run the data, but there is like a marked difference between cis men and everyone else who answers that question. And for me, I feel like it gives you really good data of like how in touch someone is with their emotions and like if someone is like how someone is responding to how something feels or says and like how close they are to their knowledge of what's going on for themselves. And it's something that I found really helpful in the play that I do with people because I do like really intense psychological play. So I sort of need to know like how disassociated are you from your feelings? And when's the last time you cried when your dad died 25 years ago?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
You had some, I was taking a look at your contact form too and had some great ones, largely about finance, which I really enjoyed. It's like, yes, give me all of the data, all of the information as soon
Yeah.
as possible. It's good. It's great. Well, I'm
Yeah,
curious, like, how was it making those clips for you? They seemed really fun. I'm curious, like, about how they sold. I feel like people love like a program to go through.
I have the final one to release either tonight or tomorrow. But yeah, I had the idea for it a few months ago and I knew immediately. I was like, this is going to blow all my other clips out of the water. I know this is going to be like it. Like this is going to be like what is like blowing me up and it did. Like it my top selling clips now uh, I want clips is my my top selling clip site. But though step one immediately outsold all of my other clips that had been up for years by like 150 sales. Like blew
That's
literally
amazing.
blew everything else out of the water completely. Um, I think a lot of I also feel like things were a little bit different when I first started making clips. I didn't really see people talking about porn addiction as much. I feel like it was more like there obviously has always been humiliation, but it was like more like you're a loser, like you're pathetic, like this is what you do because you're a loser, like um but I feel like some people are like are afraid to bring up too much of a mirror to it. Like they don't want to scare someone away by being like, look how much money you've spent, look how bad this is. And like I love to do like
Right.
focus on that and be like, how many hours have you actually spent like jerking off? Like, do you think that's normal? Like how many hours are you going to spend tonight? Like, and really like rubbing their face in it, and being like, no, this is a problem, like this is a serious problem. But the worst part is that you can't stop. Like you tell yourself that you're going to stop and you stay away for like a couple weeks and then you come back, you inevitably like return. And I that those were definitely big with like the relapse fantasy clips, but once they took that category away, I feel like it kind of, I don't know, I'm seeing now more porn addiction humiliation and stuff, which it's funny because subs just like eat that up. Like the buyers like love it. Like you were saying, I feel like the more taboo and like the more like shame is around it, like the sexier it is. And obviously every man would be embarrassed to admit a porn addiction, especially publicly. Um so I think like really like labeling them as a porn addict and like having them like
Right.
identify as that and like make that part of their identity too, like it just encourages the addiction. And so with the 12 step program, like I said, I did actually follow the real 12 step program, which has been also interesting because I've had a few people message me. Like I had one person reach out and he was like, this is so triggering. Like, I can't believe you made this series. Like, I actually work in an AA. Like, he's like, I work in AA, like their admin basically, like pretty high up. And he's like, I've been on and off recovering for like 10 years, and he's like, this clip series is like just insane, and he loved it, but he was like, I'm just like he's like showing this to someone,
It did something.
and then also like the evil part in my mind too is like, now if they actually try to go through the 12 steps as for this, it's not gonna work, because they're just gonna sexualize it.
I love the sadism. Oh my God. I think there's something too, like, about this is the kick that I've been on, is that humiliation is really about being seen in a way that you feel is honest. And I hear that in what you're talking about, of like, right, like I can call you a loser, like I can do like a big L in front of my forehead and like see how that makes you feel. But like if you want to go deeper beyond like what just like the like tropes
Mhm.
are, you kind of like have to like get into more niches. And I think that like self-reflexive, that like reflexive practice of like holding a mirror up to someone and be like, no, like this is what you're doing, this is who you are, like you could be there fucking your wife, but instead you're
Yeah.
watching this 12-step porn addiction video and you can't stop. Like how many times are you watching it, like just over and over again? I think there's something about that like clip series that really does a really phenomenal job of like holding up the mirror to someone. And so I come from a background in filmmaking and psychology, and I used to be like the videographer for a very, very deranged, I say this endearingly, and also a porn company. It was like very intense. I couldn't eat eggs for like 6 years after one of the photo shoots. There was just like so much going on there. And so I kind of have like a storied relationship with filmmaking where like what I like doesn't really sell based on the like amount of labor I like to put into like the like more artistic ones. I have this really beautiful clip that I love called The Fetish, where I like go into unpacking some of the like
You said
psychoanalytic components
that
of the
movie.
fetish.
Oh my God. That
Have
one
you
is,
seen it?
yes, you said that to me when you had it, when you tweeted
Oh
about it.
yeah.
Like that is art.
It was
That
so fun to make, but I'm like, that took me like
is
thank
love.
you. I thankfully had a patron who funded it because it took me like 3 months to make. And I'm like, that just doesn't work when you're like selling clips. And so I like my relationship to content making is I like go through phases where I'm really into it. And I go through phases where I'm like, wow, I hate working so much. Like just don't want to do this. And I think I'm like always taking content, but like the sitting down to like film a clip really works best for me when I'm like inspired by a submissive. And I used to have an ex-boyfriend who I turned into my cuck who would film some of my content. And that was always my best-selling content of like being able to like talk to the camera, or even when he wasn't there. I have this like ex-boyfriend series that kind of goes through like a similar arc of like the breakup to like turning you into my cuck. And I think there's something about the like being able to establish kind of a more personal relationship, rather where like it feels like you're actually talking to them rather than like they're just watching porn. And I think that's something that like I love about being able to chat with my subs on fan sites and stuff like that, is because I like that data, because I like that information. I really love getting to know someone so I can get into their head. And when I have those types of dynamics that can kind of like feed the content that I'm making, it just always goes so much better for me. Like I don't love talking to, I like really need to like conjure someone up in my head and feel like I'm talking to them for it to go as well as I'd like to. And I'd love to hear a little bit about like how you run your clip business and like what goes into making a clip for you and like your relationship to clip making.
Definitely, like what you were saying, a lot of my clips are inspired by my submissives and like sessions that or relationships that I have with them, or stories that they've told me. Like I had one of my like close subs, like he tried to pay an escort to lose his virginity like 20 years ago, and she was basically like kind of realized that he was a loser, I guess, and realized like maybe she was a little bit familiar with that type of man, but she took his money and was like, I'm not gonna you're, you're gross, you're disgusting, you're a loser, whatever. And I made a clip about it.
Hot.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think a lot of them have a lot of like common fantasies or common experiences. So then like saying one of my subs experiences, it's always funny how many other subs then message me or email me and they're like, oh my God, it's crazy. This is like, you're talking to me. It's like, you know me, like, but I'm just talking about another sub who's just similar. Yeah, I think too, like with for myself, I definitely also struggled with like, I love to be creative. I love to have these like really amazing like role play like ideas and then try to like act them out. Or like I said, I worked as a makeup artist for a while. So like one of the first clips I put like so much effort in was like, it was like a kind of like an evil succubus kind of thing. So I start the clip and I look like really cutesy and I have like a little sundress on and I'm like just like a nice girl. And then it kind of like, I think it was a blackmail clip. It was so long ago, but and then it switches to like my face with like special effects, like scary makeup, like bloody. It's like scary. And I loved it. Wasn't very popular with my fans at all. Um, and I've definitely
You
had,
sometimes still have to make the clips that are just for you.
yeah. Like, yeah, there's definitely been a few that like I put a lot of time and effort into and then they just didn't really sell at all, versus like when I just do a more simple one that's inspired by a sub and everybody eats it up. That's something I definitely have learned this year and that has definitely really helped my growth as a clip creator, is just like giving people what they want and like creating more content like what I have that my fans like so much. Like I said, I created my first Gooning clip in 2019 and it was immediately like my best-selling clip at the time. And I don't know why it took me so long to like hone in on that. Like I don't know why. I was just like ignoring my data for a while. I feel like just like, well, I think this will be good,
Yeah.
instead of looking at all the numbers and I'm like, well, this is what my fans actually like to see from me. So yeah, for myself, I just like honing in on like 3 or 4 categories usually. So when I'm planning my clips, I usually do 3 or 4 clips a week. So usually try to hit one of those categories each week. And then also I think one of my fears too with that was that they were going to feel repetitive. But I realized that doesn't really matter. Like if they like it and they're still eating it up and they're still like wanting more of that content, then why should I try to change it up or try to like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like,
Totally. People really, I feel like, know what they want, and it's a specific, like they'll be coming. Also, when you make more and more of like a specific niche, people will be coming to you and finding you
yeah.
because of that.
And I see that with myself, with my own content consumption, like I love those like people on TikTok that do the little comedy skits. And like a lot of times they'll have like 1 or 2 characters that they do over and over that I really like. And I'll like go to their page and I'll just watch all of the videos of like those specific characters that I like. And I'm like, well, I know this is what people are doing with my stuff as well. Like they're coming to my page and they're like, okay, I want Gooning and porn addict content. So I'm going to see look up all of her videos that have this. Yeah. Cause I don't really do much like foot fetish, like cuck stuff, like things like that. I feel like when I first started making content, I tried to do everything. Like I wanted to get as many, cast my net as wide as possible. But I've definitely realized that you do get, and like you said, a lot more clients that are like similar coming to you when you actually niche yourself and when you like stick to a few categories, which also just makes sessioning easier, because then I know like my clients are pretty predictable. Like they have a lot of similarities, so like they're a lot easier to understand than like having so many like spread out niches.
Yeah, I think too. I think of like making as like advertising, marketing. I mean, I don't have like a my business isn't coming from
Yeah.
clips. It's like if someone like I think it's like a very different like way to engage with online work that we have. But I think of it a lot as like marketing and like putting out. I think of this as like all my social media of like what will I get back from this? Like what energy am I putting out there and like what is going to come back to me and like what will it manifest? And I think it's been really helpful to be like very specific of the subs that I want to interact with and then thinking about from there what content I want to make to like funnel them into
Yeah,
me.
I used to focus a lot on sissies. I think because that was my first real introduction to kink was with a sissy, and because I'm a makeup artist, it just felt like it naturally kind of went hand in hand with that. And I'm like, oh, I love to feminize. I've done a lot of makeup on men. I love doing drag makeup and like actually feminizing people. So I was like, oh, this is like
Yeah.
perfect. But like most of my experience was terrible with sissies. Like I did not like that customer base. And so like a few years ago I did like a 180, like stop making sissy content, stop like posting for sissies. My like little slogan at the time was tease, deny, and sissify. And like I just like had so many sissies for a while, and just yeah, like I realized that that's not the customers that I like was really enjoying anymore. And like some of them were good, but most of them were just not my favorite, like not good experiences. So I just yeah, and then I realized that how
Yeah.
much more I just prefer like gooners and like edger, like at people that were really into edging and really into denial and like pushing their own limits to see how far like they can take things like that. Um
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I feel like people have such mixed experiences with sissification clips. I know like I've written a lot about gender and like gender play and exploring the like limits and constraints of gender through BDSM relationships and through play. And I've found that a lot of people who come to me now for gender play or sissification are less interested in the humiliation aspects and are more interested in like exploring, getting like having an avenue to explore their gender. And I get a lot of people who like um who are on some trans continuum or are exploring their gender in some way and like feel more able to be sexual when they're feminized because it's more aligned with their gender presentation. And I find that to be really, really fun. But I just won't, like, one of my hard limits is humiliating someone for wanting to be a woman. Like I'm like, I don't know, like it's great. Like I don't know what there is to like really humiliate you about, like other than your own humiliation. Like I'll like you can be humiliated by and like your own existence is fine by me. But I think someone said to me, a sub said to me the other day that like women these days just don't understand how humiliating it is for a man to want to be a woman. And I'm like, I think that's probably I can understand that. I feel like it has kind of like shifted. And like I really enjoy the like deep psychological play with people who are interested in like experimenting with gender of like it's like holding up that mirror. It's like, what are you so ashamed of? Like, what about this? What about like wanting to look like me? Do you find so humiliating? Like that you don't know how to dress yourself, that like that you don't know how to do your makeup.
And yeah, and then like a lot of it, like we were talking about, is probably just shame from upbringing, or like religious shame. Yeah, that's I definitely think of it like I love those kinds of clients. Like I used to have a few like long-term clients that I think were like actually trans women that just weren't like living that life out, but those were my favorite kinds. The
Yeah.
kinds that weren't coming about humiliation, were just more like wanted a safe space to wear pantyhose and to dress up and feel sexy, and like rather than just yeah humiliating them for looking feminine or for feminine traits that they think they're acting out. But I also do think of it
Yeah.
like as like fishing, like you said. I think of all like clips and content, like everything you put out, I feel like is kind of like casting a line and like fishing, and like because even when my clips sell really well, like the majority of my content comes from, or the majority of my income comes from one-on-one interactions that from subs that I might pick up from my
Yeah.
clips. But yeah, and that's definitely been big too. It's something I tell people that are like newer or like more unsure of their content, is like you have to think exactly of what kind of submissive you want to attract and what kind of client you want to be dealing with, and making content that like is going to attract those kinds of like clients. And then yeah, posting yourself as many places as possible to cast as many lines as you can.
Totally. I feel like it's something that's so over that can be so overlooked too. It's just like how like one client, one submissive can like radically change your,
Mhm.
your income in like a crazy way. And I think about that a lot. Like I don't like want to be dependent on one submissive for my income, but also just knowing that like what you're putting out there can bring that in, I think is really helpful too. And I think it's helpful to hear like clip makers talking about like, oh, like, you know, like most of my money is coming from like what the clips have brought to me rather than like the clip payment like hitting my bank account. And I think that's true for so many people. And especially like people who are not on the top 100 list who still do very, very
Yeah,
well. Um,
definitely.
I, I'm curious about, you talked a little bit about like growing up in a like female supremacy household, and I'm curious like how that plays a role in your work and like your perspectives of femdom.
Yeah, I feel like I am definitely a female supremacist through and through. Like I say that in my normal life. I say that to like every man that I'm dating. Like when like, you know, because a lot of men now will bring up like, oh, like, well, she's a feminist or like things like that. I'm like, yeah, I'm not a feminist. Like I'm a female supremacist. Like there's a difference. Like I uh yeah, I've always thought women are better leaders, like, and I was kind of shown that really early on. Like my mom was like the boss. My parents worked together. My mom was the boss at work, my mom was the boss at home, and just not that I think that men I think a lot of, especially like vanilla men, when I say that, they're like, oh, so you hate men. Like, I'm like, no, like I don't hate men at all. Like I think men have their place also. I just think women are better leaders, and I think women are better at multitasking, and they're more empathetic, and like just generally stronger leaders. And I think men can get really overwhelmed, like having a lot of tasks and just like not really knowing what to do or where to start. And I think having a woman like guide them and give them direction of like, if you do this, this, and this, you're good, and if you do this, this, and this, you're bad, and just really simplifying it in that way for them is really helpful. Because I think men are useful, and I think men do have their place, but I think that men are much better at like carrying out instructions rather than being the one making the decisions and being the one, yeah, giving the instructions. And I think that the main argument for a long time has been like against female supremacy or against like female leaders has been that like women are more emotional. One, I think that's because a lot of people don't consider anger an emotion, which is how most men react to things. And also because, but I also think it's a strength. I also think like being an empathetic person makes people like a wonderful leader. And being like more emotionally in touch with yourself. But yeah, and I see that a lot. I have quite a few subs who are like in positions of power or are in the military or like other things like that are very like rigid. Um, and just how much they like that, and how much they like a simplified like, oh, women can be so confusing. I hate when I'm dating a girl and I don't really know what she wants or how to make her happy or blah blah blah. And so I think femdom relationships can be so helpful, just like making it very black and white for them. Like if you do XYZ, you're a good boy, you're going to get a pat on the head and a little reward, and if you do X, Y, and Z, you're bad, and I will be displeased with you, and this will happen. And just having that like laid out for them very clearly instead of like passive aggressive or like, you know. But I think like for women to be better leaders, they have to step into their power and like be aware of that and communicate directly rather than like the passive aggressive thing that I think a lot of women do in like normal relationships.
Yeah, I think stepping into your power is like profound. And I definitely, well, I think it goes back to the like alexithymia conversation that we were having of like women are conditioned to allow to be with their feelings and not have them like overtake them. I think for me, I don't identify as a female supremacist, mostly just I think I am supreme in all of my relationships. Like, and I think for me, it comes from like I've kind of had like an evolving relationship with like what I want, what and why I want people to surrender to me. And for me, like where I've gotten in my like dominance and my journey is like I want them it to be for a reason. Like I want people to surrender to me because of something specific about me. It's another question I ask on my website is like what specifically about me brought you here? And I feel like that's a really important question to me because I actually find it a kind of like a turn off when I'm being like when I'm being fetishized in a specific
Yeah.
way that I find some of the like, oh, like any woman will do. And which I think is very different than like you being a female supremacist versus like one of your submissives being like, ah, like a woman. and and finding that. And I think so like in how I navigate my relationships because I am a woman, like I am supreme because that is who I am and like what I'm bringing to it. But I feel like it's been really it's like deepened my relationships a little bit just because of my own relationship to power of being like worshiped for something like very specific about me that no one else has, and being able to connect with submissives who are like specifically interested in that I think has been really helpful. And I think like you of course can find that with like people interested in like worshiping at the altar of women, which I'm sure is like most of my clients as well. But I think like there is I think I just got like tired
Put
of
into
being like fetishized. Yeah, like being put in a box and being fetishized and like um that I really just like kind of like went the other way, the other
Yeah,
way with
I
it.
definitely get that. I hate when a sub approaches and it feels like they're just looking for like they sent this message to 10 other DOMs, or maybe they're just looking for the fastest response that day. Like it's so like
Yeah.
like icky. Rather than someone like approaching and
Yeah,
being,
it's not good.
hey, I followed you for so long. I really love this. I've seen that you do this. I've seen this. I think you're so amazing. Like for this, like it's so much more special when it's like that than like I'm looking for a mistress to serve. Like
Right. Yeah. And then it becomes it I feel like I hope subs take this seriously because I do think it's something that I hear from so many DOMs of like not really being interested in like it's like sure, like I'll take your fucking money. If you want like me to like if you're just like throwing money at me and like are obsessed with my tit or obsessed with my feet, like great. Like I don't have a problem with that. I'm not gonna say no to that kind of money. But like if you want to develop a DS relationship with me, like it has to be about something about me specifically that spoke to you that inspired your submission, not just like you're sitting there like jerking off and like I'm the first person that you see and hopefully I'm the first person who responds to you. And I do feel like it's always the people doing that who are like, I want to live in your basement, mistress. Like, please, can I live in your basement? Like, oh, sorry, you didn't respond fast enough. Like, I'm not gonna go live in someone else's basement. It's just wild
that
to me.
response before they're like, well, actually, so and so already took all my money, and now I don't want to talk to you. I'm like, okay. And you can tell that he
It's
probably sent out 10 like copy and paste the same things, and then yeah, whoever responds first.
yeah, it's very different. And I wonder too, like, so I feel like it sounds like you do a lot of like one-on-one Skype stuff and like connect with clients. And I do as well. And that's definitely like my preferred form of dominance. It's how I actually feel most dominant is when I'm engaging with someone that I can be dominant towards and like their submission like feeds my dominance and like that kind of like interplay. I think DS for me is very like interrelational and I find sometimes making clips to be hard to convey that, but I'm curious, like, how do you navigate that for yourself? You talked a little bit about like the custom clips that you make that really like have a wider audience, but like how have you kind of like changed in what you've been producing as a clip artist to like be more aligned with like your own dominance and what you're interested in?
I think I also definitely very much feed into the like parasocial relationship stuff in my clips. Like I will get like really close to the camera or like put my hand under it like this and be like pretend I'm like have their face, and like talking to them like that and being like, this is so special, like what we have, like you're never going to be able to replicate this. You can't find this feeling anywhere else. And like just like a lot, I say a lot of things like that in my clips, and I think that that really like feeds into that as well, and like just making them feel like there is a connection even if I haven't even if I haven't spoken to them yet. And I get a lot of messages like that from people that are like, I've been watching your clips for years, like I feel like we have like a relationship even though like I've never spoken to them. um I think clips can be really like, I also love to use clips within sessions. Like a lot of the times when I'm playing with a sub online, especially if it's going to be like a video response session or something like that, I'll have them get a few of my clips first and watch my clips first to kind of get into that like subspace more. I think especially my clips that have like a lot of, the spirals and like kind of more mesmerizing aspects are really effective tools for them when I'm for them when I'm sessioning with them, or even on Skype. Like I'll have them like, we'll be Skyping from their phone and they'll be like playing videos of me in the background on their computer. um I love to just like use my clips like that, and yeah, just like kind of feed the like parasocial relationship that they have with me.
Oh, that's fun.
Um and yeah, just using that to, and I also kind of use it to like gauge subs, like if we are going to session and I'll tell them 3 clips that I want them to go get, then asking them like which one was their favorite and why did they like that the most. And then that kind of gives me more of a sense of like what they actually like, because I think some subs aren't very good at explaining what they like when I ask them their kinks,
Yeah.
they're very like general. So then when I'm like, okay, well, what about this video? Like, was it the outfit? Was it how I'm talking? Was it like that I'm so close up to the camera?
Right.
Like, what, why? Um, yeah, I definitely use them also for like research like that.
I think it's market research. It's very, very helpful. Have you ever made like a parasocial clip? I feel like that would be really good and could be really dark, where it's like you think I know everything about you, but you don't even but I don't even know that you exist. You don't
Yeah,
exist to me. And here you are spending 8 hours a day watching my video.
right. And I'm such a huge part of your
It is
life.
amazing that you can conjure that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's definitely, I think
And
one
you're
of,
just a notification for me.
exactly. Like you're just another sale for me, and then I'm your whole day.
Yeah. It's hot.
Yeah.
I do feel like it's like so much of it for me is like what are the like very, very specific ways that we can make that power dynamic explicit rather than like moving from like the femdom tropes, like the like classics, which I think are like very effective for a reason. There's a reason like so many people are like triggered by it, like the same specific things, by like the fuck you pay me, by the like L for the loser. But I think that's what's so cool and so special about some of the like more involved clips that you're doing with like the porn series clips is that it really hits on something specific that feels deeply personal for people. And I think like right, like even when we're talking about porn, I think something that's so cool with like OnlyFans and fan sites is that like now you can talk to the performers that you're seeing. Like whereas before it was entirely parasocial. It was entirely an isolated experience when people were just like watching porn on tube sites or like buying clips. And I think there is something that really kind of like disrupts that
Mhm.
like more solo experience of being able to engage with your favorite performers that I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah. I think it's I really love it. I love the idea, especially with fan sites. I don't always love how much people expect for what they're paying for a month, but I love that you are able to like
Yeah,
interact with them one-on-one. Yeah. And like hear feedback from people or like their favorite clips or just yeah, I get a lot of messages from fans like that have I guess been lurking for a long time and they're like I've always loved these clips or this clips, and it's really nice for me hearing that feedback too and seeing like what tends to be the favorite or what's sticking with people the most or like yeah, like it's crazy too, like the longer you're online, like the more like content people have of you, like people sending you photos of yourself from like 5 years ago. That was like you're like, wow, like I don't even have those photos. Or like that, like a
that's
clip.
hilarious. You're like, thank you. Please archive that for me.
I'm like, wow, okay. Or it'll be something that you post.
I just had a submissive, yeah, I just had a submissive send me an archive of all of my content. I've just like my executive functioning was not made for like part of the reason I started doing sex work is like I am not built for a 9 to 5. And so like the DOMs who do like clip production are like always releasing new clips. I'm just like always inspired by and I like just don't have the organizational skills to like do that full time. And I had one of my subs like built a bot and like sent me an archive of all of my clips with like a spreadsheet that like was automatically made with like all of the tags for all of it and like all of the descriptions for it, like including just like 30-second audio notes that I've sent out. And I was just like, wow, like I am that felt good to me about DS, like that personal relationship where I'm like, you are literally like giving your executive functioning towards my success. And I'm like, that was incredible. But I like, there was so much stuff in there that I had no idea existed because once I sent it, it's just like, whoop, that's like gone forever now.
Those like data kinds of subs are my favorite. I had one sub this year. He like has barely even paid me, but he like studies the clip sites. Like he studies like I want clips for sale especially, and like studies the trends of like the categories, studies who had like he documents every top selling clip every single day. Like he knows like he I don't know, I don't he must be tracking so many people because I've seen Dom's like I've seen him respond to Dom's tweets. Like one of my friends recently posted like I forget how many, but she was like, "Oh, I released this many clips this year." And he replied to it and was like, "Yeah, looks like you have a schedule too." And he posted a calendar that has X's for the whole year on each day that she released a clip throughout the whole year. He's like, "You're almost at 100." Like it's just crazy. I'm like, and he sent that to me as well of my own data. And then he also sent me like what my best categories are, like how what
That's
days of the
amazing.
usually top selling. Yeah, just like I was like, wow, like I like you were I'm
I
not
love data subs.
yeah, I was like, wow. Like he even told me on Clips for Sale, he's like, you should actually go back and like tag these videos like under Gooning so that you have more under the Gooning fetish because these categories aren't really doing things for you. Like it's just crazy because I'm like, wow, like he there are some people like who are really like tracking everything.
That's how you put your porn addiction to good use.
Yeah,
Like, let's just say
that is a useful point.
full circle.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. That should be like step 13 is like now track your porn habits and send them to me so that I can analyze the data.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the steps I said for them to keep a log of how much jerking off they've been doing. I have like an email dedicated to it, and that email is just like flooded with like confessions, like time jerked jerking off. Like that email is crazy. I think that's
That's
another.
hilarious. Oh my God, that's so fun, the interactive component.
Yeah, I think that's another thing I was gonna say, going with the parasocial thing. A lot of my clips do have like a call to action as like, I want you to tell me like the most you've ever jerked off in a day. Like send me an email to this email. I want to know like how many hours, what's the hardest you've gone, or like I want to know um one of the steps for the porn addiction series was I want you to like a big focus of AA and so Porn Addicts Anonymous is like taking responsibility for everything that your addiction has done to your life and to anyone else's life. And so one of the steps is being honest with yourself about how many people you've affected through your porn addiction. So I had them write me an email being like, these are the people I've hurt with my porn addiction, like my ex-girlfriend, my ex-wife, my friends who I bail on all the time, or like my boss because I don't complete like finish like get deadlines done because of my porn addiction. Like those things are really interesting too. But I think also having the call to action is like just like further like solidifies the clip in their head and like
And I
makes.
think you, for that matter, too, like the right, like I think there's encouraging people to have a parasocial relationship with you is an art form of like influencers and content creators. And I do think that like that ability to send those messages, and also it is this like very interesting dynamic. I love like the call to action of like confession, because it is like also sharing a vulnerability that then is shared with you. Like it's a great idea to be able to have that. And I'm sure you also have so much data that to analyze and like clip ideas from that from there too.
Yeah, some people like really wrote like diary entries like confessing like their whole story.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Um, well, I feel like we're around when we said we'd wrap up this conversation, but I feel like I could continue talking to you, especially now that we got into data analysis. But I'd love to know if there's anything else you want to mention or where folks can find you.
My Twitter is at I need Valentina. My website is ineedvalentina.com. Those are definitely the best places with all my info. Um, yeah, I guess as far as anything else, oh, to vote for me for the XBiz. I'm up for Clip Artist of the Year for XBiz, so that's exciting.
Amazing.
Voting ends, I think, January 20th, so it's for a while. And yeah, I'm releasing my final step of Porn Addicts Anonymous, I think within the next 2 days. So
Amazing. I hope people enjoy, I'm sure people will enjoy it and will become further addicted to you.
yeah.
And if anyone wants to find me, I'm at bluntlinks.com. I don't share my socials anymore because I just get deleted from everything. So everything is under bluntlinks.com. It was so lovely to chat with you.
Really nice to talk.
I'm going to unrecord. Okay, you